Welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I thought today I would answer some questions that I get frequently asked. Over the past 4.5 years or so doing this YouTube channel, I've gotten a lot of questions. So I narrowed it down to about 10 that I frequently hear from people, and I'll give you my best advice based on those questions. And hopefully that'll be helpful to you, and it'll help you to avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I was first starting this. So let's get started. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks. You can get these on my merch store. There's 6 or 7 different varieties, and they all have different metal smithing information on them. This one has solder flow temperatures. Some of them have conversion charts and things like that. I like them because I can keep track of my projects in them, and that way I end up having a permanent record of what I've made, so I know how to go back and do it again if I want to, without having to recreate the wheel every time. So today we don't have a sketch or anything, we just have a list of different things I wanted to talk about. And these are in no particular order, but these are some of the more frequent questions that I get from people. And so let's try and concentrate all the answers in one video. Okay, so the first one I get is, where do you get your stones from? And I get my stones from a number of different places, but I started doing this in the 1990s, and I discovered gem shows, which come through the area now and again. I live north of Denver quite a ways, but several times a year there's a pretty decent gem show in Denver, and I can pick up supplies there. There's a big one, I think it's the second biggest in the country outside of Tucson, in Denver in early September every year, and that's usually where I go shopping for my stones primarily. Gem shows are a great place to get better deals on stones, but they're not the only place you can get things. I have had a number of very generous people over the past 4 years send me stones that they had that they weren't using, or they just wanted to donate because they liked what I was doing, and that was most generous, and I really do appreciate that. That's been a huge help in allowing me to have a variety of stones to use on the channel here, so thanks for that. I also have a good friend, John. I'll put a link to his Etsy store in the video description down below, who's my rock hounding buddy, and he cuts his own stones, and he cuts really pretty stones. So some of the stones I show on the channel are made by him. So check out his Etsy. He's got a great selection of stones over there, and he's constantly adding new ones. Second question I get is, where do I get my silver and other metal supplies? And that's primarily through Rio Grande out of New Mexico. They sort of have a monopoly on raw materials in the area. I know there's some other suppliers, but for me, they deliver pretty quickly to my area, and their prices have been comparable. Even though I get most of my materials there, it might be worth shopping around to see if there's anybody offering any better prices, since silver prices are so high. You can also cast and make your own wire and sheet if you have the right tools to do it. So that might be worth doing if you have scrap silver laying around, or old bullion coins or whatever. You can make your own. That takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of work, but it might be worthwhile with silver so expensive. As far as if you're overseas, I've been told in the UK, Cooks on Gold is a good place to get raw materials. In Australia, some of my patrons use Kudak.com, I think it's called. I know the suppliers are limited in Australia, so if you know of a better supplier and you're in Australia, leave it in the comments. Same way, if you're in another part of the world, I'm sure people disclosing where they get their stuff might be helpful to other people. So I frequently get asked about these shears. This is one of the more common questions I get, and these kind of shears are just Fiskars craft shears, and I get the kind that have little titanium coated blades, and they last quite a while, and they will cut up to about 18, but if you cut 18 gauge silver sheet with these for a long time, you will eventually break the handles. But they last a surprisingly long time, and it might be worth having to replace them now and again, just because they cut pretty well. Another question I get a lot is, how do I come up with ideas for projects? And that's a complicated question. For a long time I made pretty much variations of the same kinds of pendants and rings and bracelets. When I started the YouTube channel, I started looking for inspiration elsewhere because coming up with 3 different projects every week requires a little bit more creativity, I think, than just producing over and over very similar things. And so one of the things that helps is just look at a lot of jewelry, because there's so many different styles and techniques and things like that that sometimes just seeing other people's creativity can trigger some similar ideas in your mind. And I'm not saying just absolutely duplicate someone's ideas, but let them inspire you to come up with something that maybe you hadn't thought of before because of the creativity of their design. Another thing that I've done in the recent past is try to use out-of-the-box kind of idea generating things, like going to a thrift store and looking at all of the different stuff and jotting down ideas based on different patterns I see, or shapes that I see, or color combinations. Sometimes that can inspire some really good ideas. Or even just going to a retail store, or going to a sculpture park and looking at the different sculptures and thinking about what kind of things that inspires in you. Picking a theme. I give my patrons a theme every month. Like, I'll say, okay, this month is furniture, and you have to make a piece inspired by furniture of some sort. And there's all sorts of creative furniture out there if you do a little searching online. Sometimes I'll try to look into a particular art period, like mid-century modern is a favorite of mine, because it reminds me of my childhood, because a lot of the stuff when I was growing up were based out of mid-century modern designs or Danish modern. And so sometimes you can find some really cool shapes and patterns based off of a particular art period. So I think ultimately there's ideas out there almost everywhere you look, and you just have to think outside of the box and think, how could I incorporate that into some jewelry? And I think you'll come up with some good ideas. So, a frequent question I get is, because of the cost of silver, would it be a good idea to start trying to do this by using copper or brass to get the hang of it? The short answer to that is sure, that's a good way to get started. The longer answer, though, is that all metals solder a little bit differently, and so you're not going to get a perfect model for soldering silver by practicing on copper or brass. So I would recommend probably as soon as you can, get some silver and practice with it, even if it's kind of expensive. The good thing about metals are you can recycle them and reuse them again if you don't like what you came out with. So I think your best bet is to actually use the material you're planning to use in the long run. Another frequent question I get is, how do you know what gauge of silver to use for a particular purpose? And that's wire or sheet. And there's 2 factors I really consider when I'm picking out the stock that I'm going to use for something. First is, what do I want the piece to look like ultimately, because the different sizes of wire and sheet are going to affect the outcome. Different sizes of silver are going to produce either a bold or a delicate piece, and depending upon what kind of outcome you want, you're going to make a decision based on that. The other thing is structural integrity of the piece. How small of delicate wire can you get by with in order to create some real intricate details and still have a strong piece that'll last for a long time? There are situations where using too thin of silver, for instance on the back of a bezel, if it's in a place where the metal gets flexed a lot, that's going to be a weak spot, and it's going to eventually wear and break there. So you want to make sure you have strong enough, thick enough silver to stand up to flexing and things like that in the metal. So keep that in mind. With practice and making a number of pieces, you'll kind of get the hang of that. Sometimes to produce a quality, strong, long-lasting piece, you need to use a little bit thicker metal. This is a really frequent question I get from people, is they say, my bezels are really rough looking when I'm done, and I don't know how to fix that. And I experienced that as well when I first started, and it's because getting your bezels shaped and everything at first takes a little practice, and you get to where you beat up the metal a lot less over time once you've gotten a few under your belt. I usually tell people to make at least 30 bezels before they get too frustrated with the way their bezels are coming out. There's a lot of ways when you're first learning how to solder to mess up your bezel, and after you've knocked out 30 or 40 of them, it starts to become a lot more routine, and your bezels will start looking better. So one thing you can try to use a little bit thicker bezel. Thin bezel tends to get beat up much more easily. I used to use 28 gauge, and I rarely use that anymore. That's only what, 0.33 or something like that millimeters, and I would suggest 26 is a good starting point probably, and that's 0.41 millimeters. So my answer to that one is make a whole bunch of bezels. Don't be too disappointed in yourself. It takes a while to get the hang of it, so they will start to look better over time. The next question is, can I make a living doing this? And that is also a complicated question. And it's affected by a number of different factors. First off, probably not at first, because it takes some practice to get to where you're making saleable pieces that people want to buy. And that's just a normal part of the process. You may have some people wanting to buy a few things once they hear that you're making jewelry now, and that's okay as long as you're selling quality pieces that will last a long time. So it's easy to want to jump right into selling stuff, but I would say, you know, give yourself a year or two before you really start getting serious about selling things. The quality of your pieces will have increased with your skills as you get better, so I think you'll have better luck if you wait a little while. Another factor is the fluctuating metal prices. I didn't used to figure in the cost of the metals into my final sale price because it was so negligible with silver. It was $4 an ounce when I started doing this, and so if you wasted a little, or if you made a pretty big chunky piece of jewelry, it didn't cost you that much to make. Mostly you were paying for my time, and so right now that's a big factor, because if you have an ounce of silver in a bracelet or something, that's automatically right off the top, that's about $100 worth of silver. So you've got to factor that in, unfortunately, now. The other thing is, most people when they start are relatively slow at making things, and it takes a little while to build up your speed. Once you get confident and you've figured out all of the little tricks and the things that can go wrong, your speed will increase. So I talked about this in a previous video about how to price things, and rightly so, some people mentioned in the comments that when you first start out, the number of hours you spent making a piece, you can't pay yourself an hourly wage and expect to be able to sell it, because it may take you 10 hours or something to make something relatively simple when you're first starting, because you just are learning the basics. After a while you get to be able to where you can knock out a ring in an hour or two, and that way makes it easier to figure out an hourly wage for yourself. So the final thing about making a living doing this, you have to find a place to sell your beautiful creations that you've come up with, and there's a number of different ways to do that. You can get into art galleries if you have stuff that is appealing to art gallery owners. There are retail stores you can consign in. That's an option too. You can do art festivals, street fairs, craft shows, things like that. And depending upon the venue, you can do quite well sometimes. But there's also those times where you go to a show and you come home with a big goose egg. You don't sell a thing. So it takes time to figure out where your best places to sell stuff are, and that will come with time as well. So, are you going to get rich at first? Probably not. Will you be able to make a living at it eventually? If you get good enough, yeah, I think you probably can. But there's a much higher number of hours you spend trying to sell the pieces you make compared to the amount of time you spend making them. So it's distressingly high, the amount of time it takes to sell stuff. Another factor you might want to consider about selling things and making a living doing this is turning something you're really enjoying into a job can suck some of the fun out of it. And so you might want to consider holding off on that until you've done it for quite a while. You certainly can make gifts for your family members and friends, and pieces for yourself, and really get some serious experience before you try to turn it into a business. So, what is my favorite tool, or my most useful tool, is a question I get pretty frequently. I have trouble picking favorites, but probably my favorite is my acetylene air torch by Smith. It's a perfect torch for soldering silver, in my opinion. It almost never fails me. I've gone through 2 of them over the past 30 years. The first one started to get leaky and I finally had to replace it, but it's a good torch and it serves me well. As far as other fancy tools, my rolling mill from Pepe Tools is a great rolling mill. I had a cheap one for years and they kindly sent me this one. And I'll put a link in the video if you're interested in getting one of those. It's a great rolling mill. It's a combo, 130 millimeter combo, I think. So it's got a flat area and a way to roll out wire. And I use that almost every day. So it's a good tool from a quality company, I think. So finally, what's the best advice I can give a new person getting into this? Yes, you can learn how to do this by watching YouTube videos. But I think it's super valuable to take an in-person class with somebody, somebody local to where you're at, who has some experience. Everybody does things a little bit differently, but there are some nuances to soldering and things that are hard to pick up through videos. And having somebody there watching what you're doing and seeing what's going on that might not be working right is super useful. And I think it's worth taking a small intro class somewhere, at least to get started and get some basics down. Second is don't get too upset when you have errors that happen, when something melts or you mess up a bezel or you overheat something and it starts getting weird or fire scaled or whatever. Those are opportune moments to figure out something important about how you're doing things. And rather than getting super upset about a failure, think about it as an opportunity to figure out what went wrong and analyze the situation. It helps you to isolate how things went south so that you can avoid having that happen in the future. And I think that's a useful piece of advice. So don't get too upset about things going wrong. Look at it as an opportunity to figure out how not to do it again. That's when I usually learn the most, is when I mess something up. All right, well, those are just a few of the common questions I get. I hope that was useful. You know, if you have input on those things, or you have some other things that I forgot to talk about that maybe are frequent beginner questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or put them in the comments. I'd love to have your input as well. So I hope you found those answers useful, and if you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button. There's a new feature on YouTube called hyping videos, and if you could do that too, that really helps. The algorithm's really been hitting me hard lately, and my views are way down, so I thought I might ask for your help with that. I'd also love it if you go visit my main channel page. I have 630 plus videos now, so there's a lot of videos there and quite a bit of useful content, I think. So lots of projects for sure if you like having ideas presented to you that you can try and do too. So check it out, subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost anything and it makes it much easier to find my content. I'd like to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I could not do this without their help, not just the financial part, but also the great community that they've built over there. I find it a valuable resource for me, and I hope it's as valuable a resource for them as it is for me, because there's a nice group of people with a lot of talent and a lot of knowledge, so we can all kind of share ideas and resources, and it's very nice over there, so thanks for that. The other group are my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 28,400 subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you also for the lovely comments. I love hearing about people's individual journeys in metalsmithing and the way they do things, and suggestions for videos, constructive criticism. All of that stuff is really nice, and I appreciate it. So thanks for being such a nice group of people. I also appreciate their financial contributions as well. The Buy Me a Coffees, the super thanks, the purchases on my shop, my ebooks, all of that kind of stuff really makes my channel sustainable, and I appreciate that. Finally, there's some important links in the video description down below. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that. There's a link to my merch store where you can get those nice design idea sketchbooks and a number of other things. And there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025 tutorials, and it covers all of the tutorials I did in 2025. There's even a package deal if you want to get all 3 years that I've done that for, 2023, 2024, and 2025. You get $15 off if you buy all 3 at once, and that gives you a whole boatload of projects to work on for a long time. So, All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.